meeting of the Elmhurst City Council. I ask that you all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Patty, you ready to go?
Ready.
Clerk Spencer, please call the roll.
Kennedy, absent. Honquist.
Here.
Brennan.
Here.
Mullenor.
Here.
Goiter.
Here.
Sabatino.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Polumsky.
Here.
York, absent. Toledo.
Here.
Hart.
Here.
Levin.
Here.
12 present, 2 absent.
Well, present, 2 absent. We have a quorum. On to agenda item 3, written communications. At this time, is there anybody in the audience who has any written communication they wish to submit? If so, please raise your hand if you have any written communication you wish to submit. Seeing none, we'll go on to public forum, agenda item 4. This is an opportunity for anybody in the audience to address the council on any item they so choose. We ask that you specifically direct your comments to the chair of the meeting. When your name is called, we ask that you make way to the microphone over here on my right, Rex's left. We ask out of respect for others who may want to speak and out of respect for work that we are trying to get done here this evening, we ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. If you go over your 3 minutes, I will give you a gentle reminder and ask you to wrap up. Clerk Spencer, at this time, is there anybody signed up for public forum?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we'll start with Rex Irby.
Okay, please state your name. Address is optional.
Can you hear me okay? Good. Rex Irby, I-R-B-Y, 853 Hillside. And this is regarding item 6.23 on the consent agenda. I'm going to request, I don't know, you have to honor it, but I'd like you guys to pull that off the consent agenda. This is the $500,000 for 34 cameras, automatic license plate reader system. I've got 5 points I want to bring up. Hopefully I'll get them into 3 minutes. The problems that we're having, or not problems, but things that need to be adjusted before we go forward from the initial trial cameras that we didn't pay for, plus the 5 subsequent or 3 subsequent, whatever it was. And now we're going for 34. So these 5 items are retention policy. This was put on notice February of this year in subcommittee that we have over 12 million records in the database in the cloud regarding the whereabouts of all Elmhurst residents who get caught in the camera, with no prejudice on that statement. Most places have a policy, state law. Illinois does not, but that doesn't mean we can't have a policy as we should for legal risk. Most states are anywhere from 2 or 3 days to 90 days, and there's quite a bit of mix in there, but probably a 30-day retention policy is probably an average, but we need to have that policy. From my comments, I don't believe we've deleted any records. So what does that mean to us? Well, that means FOIA request. All the data in the cloud with our whereabouts, our children, our grandchildren in Elmhurst are in a car. They know it's a Ford, whatever. They know the year, they know the license plate, they can see the person driving it, and any decals or political statements could be on there. All that can be FOIA requested from anywhere in the world, and they'll know that your granddaughter was driving that car on that day, and your granddaughter has been doing this for the last 3 years because the data hasn't been deleted, as far as I know, unless you tell me otherwise. So that means that we think we're in a secure world with our police department's records for police investigation, but in reality, it's fully FOIA'd capability. Anybody can get to that because we don't own that data. It's kind of like the Facebook problem. So that was number 2. Number 3, no disclosure of where these 34 cameras in the tonight's public-facing document doesn't show where those cameras are going. Point number 5, the annual operating fees that were in the subcommittee that were supposed to be a part of the report are not available online either, which would be the annual operating expenses and the specific use for criminal investigation. Those are not in the report. If you want to know the annual cost of the system, it's about $136,000, about $40,000 electricity, almost $16,000 in license fees. And if it's an 8-year life on a $650 million or $650,000 investment, that's about $72,000 in capital amortized over 8 years. That comes out to, if we had 10 cases that we solved, which I'm all for, it'll be about $14,000 a case.
Mr. Irby, could you wrap up your comments?
So I think that's it for my 5 comments. Again, I appreciate you guys, if you could pull that off the consent agenda and try to reconcile these 5 key points that are very critical so we can legalize or minimize our legal risk here. Thank you.
Ken Dietz.
Hi, my name is Ken Dietz. I'm a resident of the 3rd Ward, and myself and a few neighbors get everything from Elmhurst except our water. Last month, you guys increased the surcharge to American Water, which is our supplier, which passed it on to me and to the tune of $38 a month. My current bill is $197 a month. A few years ago, Alderman Braun got us a meeting with the administration to try and help us. And we were brushed off and told, well, you know, if we can't offer help to everyone, we can't just help you. And after that, I got to thinking, well, sure you could offer it to everyone. You could have an ordinance that says any resident in Elmhurst who can't get services through no fault of their own should get some kind of help. Now, again, I'm a senior citizen. My wife and I are both retired. We don't live in a McMansion. I got a $197 bill. You know, you guys give rebates to me and any other senior citizen, so that doesn't include everyone in Elmhurst. I don't know why you can't help us. And we're reaching out to you. It's only myself and there's 5 neighbors on our block. And you can either continue to ignore us or reach out and do something. Thank you.
Claude Pagash. Did I miss him?
Claude Parkers, 566 West Gladys. Seems like the governor has got a committee started up about property taxes. In fact, we've got some legislators from the area that are going to be on the committee. State legislators are starting to get a few words from the locals. We bring this up for one reason. It's not too distant future. You're going to be studying a budget. I don't spend that much time at the budget meetings and all that, but time I do spend, everybody that shows up needs more. It would be nice if the residents' income matched the desires of all these individual bodies that you have to vote money for. But their income doesn't match it. It looks like it's got up to the state level now. And I assume they'll kick it around and everything else. But the total dependence of this body on the residents, considering the number of TIFs you voted in, the bill gets bigger and bigger, disregarding what finance said. They don't get raises proportional to the wishes of everybody you've got to supply money to. So when this budget comes up, keep in mind, a lot of people are leaving this state, and it's because of property taxes. There's no two ways about it. So maybe when some of these groups come, what you can do is just say, well, maybe you're just asking a little too much. I got a couple of questions. On refuge, when it was brought up what we pay for it, one of the aldermen said that a percentage of that fee is for administration by the city. I'd like to know what that proportion is. And one other question that may become apparent or whatever. You're putting up a high-rise on Addison. If I buy one of those condos, as an owner, do I come under the TIF? Addison Street is in the TIF. I happen to own the property. So that means I can come to you guys for everything I want, right? Paint the apartment, new windows. These TIFs are killing this town. They're killing a
Prakash, I
lot
ask you
of
to wrap up
towns.
your comments, please.
Well, Mayor, it's this way. I asked a couple of questions. I'd appreciate if my alderman came up with answers.
Aaron Lakowski.
Hello, my name is Aaron Ludkowski, and I live at 640 North Kenilworth in the 3rd Ward. I just wanted to talk today with you about the fact that there are several patches on the sidewalk on North York that are patches of sidewalk that are gravel, rocks, or small stones instead of actually being paved. And I think this is a big problem for me because I ride to and from work every day on this sidewalk, and I know my whole family and the rest of and a lot of other people in my area do as well. And I think this is a big issue because several times after we come home, we find that our bikes have had many dents and other scratches on them that we think is from the sidewalk that hasn't been kept up very well. And so I just like to ask that something be done about the dilapidated sidewalks in this area of town. Specifically, there's one patch of gravel between Gladys and North York that I think could be specifically helped because it's a slightly hilly part of the sidewalk, so it's hard to get up with such a large amount of gravel and stones. So I just ask that this matter be taken into consideration. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Mayor, that concludes public forum for tonight.
Okay, that's it for public forum for those who signed up on our sign-in sheet before the meeting. At this time, is there anybody in the audience who did not have an opportunity to sign in on our sign-up sheet, yet still wants to participate in public forum? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, that concludes public forum for the evening. Any announcements from the dais? Agenda item 5. Okay, we'll go on to consent agenda. At this time, is there any items any alderman wishes to see removed from the consent agenda to vote no or provide further comment? I'm going to start, though, with 6.4. I'm going to pull off for discussion, vote and discussion, and 6.9 is being removed entirely from the agenda, not ready to go. That'll be in future agendas. So I took off 6.4 and 6.9. Anyone else? Alderman Braham.
614, 615, 620.
14, 15, and 20. Okay. Clerk Spencer, you had your hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to concur with you on 6.4.
Appreciate the support. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus 6.4, 6.9, 6.14, 6.15, 6.20. Does that sound right? Motion by Alderman Toludo, second by Alderman Mulliner. Motion to approve consent agenda minus those items I listed. Clerk Spencer.
Kennedy, absent. Honquist.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Goiter.
Aye.
Sabatino.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Lumpsky.
Aye.
York, absent. Toludo.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Consent agenda minus item Z, 6.4, 6.9, 6.14, 6.15, 6.20 is approved. On to the first item pulled, and that is appointment of, 6.4, appointment of deputy clerk. I will entertain a, let's see, I guess I'll speak about it first. Yeah. So I pulled this off because hopefully we will be appointing a new deputy clerk this evening, and wanted to bring it before the floor so that our current clerk, who is here, could say a few words. Also, this isn't going to be my formal speech, but our very own Ellen Cyprian is retiring at the end of this month. We've all begged her not to go, but we all understand. So we truly will be missing her, and hopefully be appointing our new deputy clerk, who's sitting right next to her, in the next few minutes. So to put this before council for discussion and approval, I'll entertain a motion to approve agenda item 6.4, which is appointment of a new deputy clerk. Motion by Alderman Toludo, second by Alderman Braham. Anyone who wishes to speak on this, Clerk Spencer.
Well, Mayor, I'm proud to announce that we do have Amanda Malone. I think she's going to do an outstanding job. She will serve all of you quite well. She's been a deputy clerk for, I think, about 12 years at least, and she really knows her stuff, and I'm looking forward to being able to come more often and work with her, because I've met her through the municipal clerks of Illinois networking groups, and she's a good one.
Fantastic. Well, if she has your stamp of approval, I think that's pretty good. Any additional comments or questions? Seeing none, I ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll, or call the vote.
Okay, Kennedy, absent. Honquist.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Goiter.
Aye.
Sabatino.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Lumpsky.
Aye.
York, absent. Toludo.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
Motion is approved. Welcome aboard, Deputy Clerk Malone. Congratulations. Fantastic. Okay. Okay, on to agenda item 6.14. Report out of Public Works, I believe. I would ask Clerk Spencer to read the recommendation.
Did you say 6.1?
6.14. She needs it.
Oh, here it is. Sorry. Okay. With the advice and consent of the city council and the city. Oh, what did he say? I'm sorry. Okay. It is therefore the recommendation of the Public Works and Buildings Committee that the bids for the Harrison Street Storm Water Pump Station and Harrison Street Detention Improvements for Martam Construction, Elgin, Illinois, in the amount not to exceed $1,461,980. Be accepted to the city attorney to be directed to prepare the appropriate resolution. Respectfully submitted, Public Works and Buildings Committee, Jim Kennedy, Chairman, Marty Dorter, Vice Chairman, Mark Sabatino, and Mike Brennan.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the report and recommendation as read. Motion by Alderman Deuter, second by Alderman Sabatino. Vice Chairman Deuter, your report.
Thank you, Mayor. Both this report and the next one, item 6.15, are related to some improvements to the Harrison Street Stormwater Project. It's a project that, one of the early stormwater projects that came online. At the time that we brought it online, we were working with the existing pumps, and we thought that those might be sufficient to serve the project. And after it's been in service for a couple of years, we believe that we need to replace the pumps that had been there for a long period of time, and so that's what both of these reports are related to.
Okay. Alderman Rambo, I believe you pulled this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Alderman Deuter already pointed out, I pulled both because I think they go hand in hand. My primary question is in regards to this report. So my understanding from what it's stating here is that if this is approved and moves forward, that it would be an additional 1.46 million to replace the pump for this detention area, as well as the subsequent report, I think, is another odd 100,000. So $1.5 million to what is being stated, pump the basin more efficiently and effectively. So my questions are, did we, not we as the city necessarily, not the consultant necessarily, or maybe a combination, I don't know, did something go wrong where we installed initially the wrong pump? It sounds to me from reading the reports and the minutes that there's nothing operationally wrong with the pump. It's just not pumping as efficiently and effectively as one would like. I don't know if that means that there's an inch of water left, if there's 4 feet, exaggeration, left in the basin, but it seems to be an expensive move to remedy what I would deem to be slow draining issues, according to the report.
Follow up, Alderman Deuter?
Thank you. I'll point out what the report says, which the system currently has 1 pump and no backup power, so the rehab will include building modifications, the replacement of the current pump, plus the addition of a self-power supplied backup pump. And again, as I said when I first started, we didn't add a pump when we brought this project online. There was an existing basin. We left the pump. We didn't replace the pump when we made the basin bigger. And, you know, I think in seeing how it works, we want it to drain faster. We want it to have more capacity when a storm comes on the heels of a first one. So for that combination of reasons and the replacement, the backup power, it's a redundancy, and it's one that staff feels important, and the committee agreed.
Additional comments? Alderman Bram.
Thank you. My understanding is that in regards to pumping more or faster, I mean, our limitation is Salt Creek. It's not necessarily what pumps we have in the basins. I think we've discussed that concern and what we would need to do to remedy that, which would not be a different pump system. I guess I still haven't heard the answer. Yes, I understand the backup pump. Yes, I understand that's in the report. But I'm having a trouble understanding on why we need to spend $1.5, $1.6 million to change a pump that is operationally functional.
Any additional comments? Clerk Spencer, please call the vote.
Kennedy, absent. Conquest.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Mullenhour.
Aye.
Boyer,
Aye.
Sabatino,
Aye.
Leader,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Bram,
No.
Palomski,
Aye.
York, absent, Toledo,
Aye.
Park,
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
11 ayes, 1 nays, 2 absent.
That's 1 nay. Motion carries. Agenda item 6.14 is approved. On to agenda item 6.15. I'd ask Clerk Spencer to read the recommendation, if she needs it.
Yes. Okay. It is therefore the recommendation of the Public Works and Buildings Committee that the construction services engineering proposal from Christopher B. Burke Engineering LTD, CBBEL, for the Harrison Street Stormwater Pump Station and Harrison Street Detention improvements in the amount not to exceed $110,620 be accepted, that the city attorney be authorized to prepare the appropriate documentation, that the city council approve. Signed by Jim Kennedy, Chair, Marty Dorter, Vice Chair, Mark Sabatino, and Mike Brennan.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for motion to approve the report. Recommendation as read. Motion by Alderman Deuter, second by Alderman Sabatino. Alderman Deuter, your report.
Thank you, Mayor. This report is to approve the proposal for the construction engineering services for the project that we just discussed.
Okay, additional comments? Clerk Spencer. Call the
Kennedy,
vote.
absent. Conquest,
Aye.
Brennan,
Aye.
Mullen. Boyer,
Aye.
Sabatino,
Aye.
Leader,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Graham,
Aye.
Palomski,
Aye.
York, absent. Toledo,
Aye.
Park,
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays. Agenda item 6.15 is approved. On to agenda item 6.20. This is a report out of Public Affairs. I would ask Clerk Spencer to please read the recommendation.
It is therefore the recommendation of the Public Affairs and Safety Committee that the City Council approve the installation of the new traffic control signage at the intersections as recommended above. The committee recommends the city attorney be authorized to prepare the necessary documents to City Council for City Council approval. Signed by Danny Palomski, Chair, Scott Levin, Vice Chair, Norm Leader.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the report. Recommendation as read. Motion by Alderman Palomski, second by Alderman Levin. Alderman Palomski, your report.
Thank you, Mayor. I defer to Alderman Bram, who pulled this.
Alderman Bram, you pulled this report.
Yes,
Floor is
thank you,
yours.
Mr. Mayor. In regards to this request, I appreciate the committee's hard work on this. I know this intersection has been of concern for many a years, I believe since 2012. I know both times that it was proposed that there was a lot of community concern, including this time. Back in 2012, I know that a consultant at that time, at best, made the recommendation of yield signs, and that's what was done back then. At that time, staff, as well as the consultant, did not recommend a two-way stop at this intersection. And this current evaluation of this intersection, again, the same findings were had by a different consultant, but a traffic consultant, as well as city staff. Both the consultant as well as city staff did not make a recommendation to add stop signs or replace the current yield signs with a two-way stop. My understanding from reading I believe it was the residents' submittal, their concern at this intersection was cut-through traffic, or is cut-through traffic and speed, but also the number of accidents that occurred at this intersection. And albeit I understand that concern, but looking over the accident reports, the consultant, the city, I'll throw myself in there as well, those accidents occurred not because lack of signage, but not obeying signage. So it's the driver's fault that they went through the yield sign without yielding. My concern would be if we put stop signs, would that happen even more often, especially because now twice being evaluated by city staff, by two different consultants, they both said no two-way stop is needed. This current consultant made other recommendations about looking at the intersection at York to see what could be done to prevent, well, to A, validate if there's cut-through traffic, but prevent any cut-through traffic. The MUTCD, the Manual Uniform of Traffic Control Devices, clearly states that, and I'm not saying the committee is making this statement, but since the residents made mention of it, clearly states that traffic control devices of any kind are not to control speed. Even though that is the, I would say, number one reason why the community makes a request for any traffic control device is for speed. It's also not meant to discourage in any way, shape, or form cut-through traffic. So I have concern of moving forward when on two different occasions, we have been told by two different consultants and city staff twice that this should not be a two-way stop intersection, but we're making a recommendation to move forward with the opposite of the staff and consultants' recommendation and put in a two-way stop that does not meet the MUTCD criteria. There's been many of aldermen up here. Alderman Leader has made comments in Public Works when we were in the same committee on many a times, as well as others, of following staff's recommendations. They are the experts. Well, we've had two sets of experts, two different consultants, and two sets of city staff in the many a years to say no to two-way stops. But this recommendation before us is to say, let's not follow those two different sets of recommendations, but let's put them there anyway. It does not meet the criteria. Yes, traffic accidents are scary, especially at any type of right angle or T-bone accident. But I do not believe that we should be negating the experts without any validation on our own end to say otherwise. We have no validation. There was a comment made about, yes, you should use the lesser of traffic control devices first, which are what the yield signs are in place today. But it doesn't say, then go ahead and do stop signs. It says, if there is a need, if it meets this criteria. It doesn't. So I cannot support this.
Additional comments? Alderman Polonsky.
Thank you, Mayor. We talked about this a number of times, and while it first was brought to the city with the neighborhood concern of cut-through traffic, the objective of the committee was not to control cut-through traffic. There are some recommendations that spoke to that, but the issue at hand that we are looking to try to reduce is the number of accidents. So we also discussed that we are not trying to put in stop signs to control speed, and we recognize that stop signs where they're not necessary, used in an effort to control speed, can create more accidents. But the underlying assumption in when you put in traffic control devices is that the surrounding areas all have appropriately placed traffic control devices. And one thing that's unique about this is that there are a number of intersections surrounding this one that have stop signs, including four-way stops, where they are not justified, and we can't find the rationale behind it. So the flow of traffic is not typical in this area. Additionally, it should not be interrupting generally the flow of traffic going south and going west across town. This is a pretty isolated area that serves that little neighborhood. And one last piece, you did mention it, and this is one thing that we focused on too. The MUTCD states, quote, "At intersections where a full stop is not necessarily necessary at all times, consideration should first be given to using less restrictive measures such as yield signs." So our thought was that less restrictive measure was used, and before that point, there were 2 accidents ever in the history, but since we put that in, there have been 3 accidents. So our thought was the less restrictive measure was implemented, but since, there are a number of factors that make it unique, and because, we can't make a causal relationship, draw that to the yield sign, we do know that since those have been in, we've seen an increase in accidents. So not to control traffic, not to control cut-through, but to manage the interchange of traffic at that intersection was the idea of the committee.
Additional comments? Alderman Toledo.
Thank you. I actually had the pleasure to attend one of the committee's meetings on this topic a number of months ago. And, I trust the work that the committee has done here. My comment on stop signs in general is there is a reason why city councils vote on traffic control devices like stop signs. If we followed just a book, a computer or a robot could do it. And there's reasons, there's unique circumstances at intersections and in neighborhoods that call for people like us to hear what is unique about those intersections, take into account the federal rules, and make a judgment call. And this is one of those situations where a judgment call is warranted, and I agree with the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm not a traffic expert by any stretch, and I've learned that very quickly in the first 2.5 years on council. So what feels obvious isn't always obvious. So I do think there's an art to it. I think there are guidelines that are provided. However, I trust that the committee's put in, several hours of due diligence on this, and therefore I'll support this report. I for one, yield signs I see in my own neighborhood myself, that people don't take them seriously all the time, and it's almost, all right, I'm gonna slow down a little bit, and there are accidents as a result. Do I feel that yield sign is better than no sign at all? Yes. We used to have what I think we termed as friendship corners in my neighborhood, and quite honestly, when my parents came in from out of town, they didn't know any different. I'd see my dad go through intersections. So that said, I do think and agree with the committee that if we've tried something to mitigate an issue, I think it's appropriate to take it to the next level and see if that will do the job. And it may be something that we have to revisit, but I think it's very prudent. Thank you.
Alderman Braham.
Thank you. In regards to some of the comments made about the neighboring intersections, I agree. There's a lot of 4-way stops and a lot of 2-way stops in this area. And I appreciate that the committee kept that into consideration, but that does not weigh into making the assessment of what should be done at this intersection. It was stated that some of those may not be justified. That doesn't mean you do the same at this intersection and put in stop signs that are not justified. It's been made in regards to those unique circumstances, and therefore, we as a elected body should make those decisions. Yes, we make those decisions with input, and the input from city staff said no. The input for 2 different consultants said no. That's the input. And I will quote the MUTCD since it's been referenced. Section 2B as in Bravo, .06, stop sign applications. What was quoted in the report is a subset of what was on that page in regards to stop sign applications. It does say, at intersections where full stop is not necessary at all times, which I would argue this is one that is not needed at all times, just by looking at the traffic flow numbers. That was my own editorial. Consideration should first be given to using less restrictive measures such as yield signs. Then it references the yield sign section. Then the next paragraph is, the use of stop signs on the minor street approaches should be considered if engineering judgment, not elected body judgment, engineering judgment. That's the consultants, that's city staff, who all have degrees in civil engineering and traffic studies, et cetera, not us, should be considered if engineering judgment indicates that a stop is always required because of one or more of the following conditions. The consultant said no. The staff, city staff, our own civil engineers said no, it's not needed. They came back with a recommendation of leave the yield signs as is and look at what we can do down the line in regards to cut-through traffic. Then there's 3 different bullet points, A, B, and C. It talks about traffic volumes exceeding 6,000 vehicles per day. It talks about restricted view, which both studies back in whatever it was, 2012 and now, show no line of sight issues. And then crash records. Yes, there's more, but it doesn't meet the criteria in the MUTCD. So there's none of those conditions that are met. The experts say let's not do it, but we're saying let's do it on what basis? If there is a basis, I could understand it. But there's no engineering judgment. It doesn't meet the criteria, and all the experts said, let's not do it. And I'll say one last thing, and that's Alderman Mulliner has brought this up in the past on various discussions of traffic control devices. If we put in stop signs or any traffic control devices that are warranted, decades ago, we had an issue with a resident coming after the city because it wasn't warranted and they got in an accident. So do we want to risk that when we don't have the backing to move forward with making these yield signs in the stop signs at this intersection?
Any additional comments? Alderman Levin.
Thank you. I understand Alderman Bram's concern. I think I've been on the council 10 years, and I believe I took one vote that was not in line with the engineers, and I perhaps regret that vote. So I proceeded with caution as we considered this, and we did spend quite a bit of time on this particular request. There are some unique circumstances, and Alderman Polomsky mentioned it, and I'll highlight it. This is an area that's bounded by York on the west. On the north, it's Cayuga, a one-way street that heads from east to west. These Oneida and Wilson dead end into Poplar on the east. And then the next major street is Madison, which maybe some of the residents felt was a cut-through issue, and there was a proposal to look at how to eliminate that cut-through traffic. But the committee felt addressing that, the steps that would need to be taken to address that potential cut-through issue was going to be more complex than looking at this unique 9 blocks of neighborhood. I think we do have to take into consideration that there is a network of nonsense in this neighborhood. You can't make heads or tails of why there are stop signs, 2-ways, 4-way stops that probably shouldn't be there. So there's almost an expectation as you're driving through that there would be a stop sign there as there are at other corners within that neighborhood. I get neighbors that come to me and say they want a stop sign or a yield sign. There's one that's 1 block from my house. They wanted a stop sign, and I explained to them I didn't want to do a referral because I took it upon myself to talk them out of it, to give the speech about how regulatory signs can actually exacerbate the problem as opposed to solving the problem. So we did look at this very carefully. The recommendation wasn't not to put in stop signs. There was, the recommendation was not to, it wasn't needed. And the committee asked our city engineer, Ken Johnson, how strongly we felt about this because of the unique circumstances. And he said, well, it's not really warranted, but I can see why you might do it in this particular situation. I'm not concerned about being sued for putting in a stop sign. Maybe we get sued for not putting one in because there have been 3 accidents there since we put in the yield signs. So, you know, there is a reason why the city council votes on it, because it has to be a law. It can't just be, you know, a staff decision to put it in. But that being said, we listened very carefully to staff. We spent a lot of time on this, and in this situation, we felt that it's probably, I'm not sure if it's gonna make a whole lot of difference, but I think it might make a difference if we put in the stop sign, and it's not gonna have, in my opinion, the deleterious effect that I've seen on other stop sign requests where people have the flow of traffic broken up just because someone on that corner wants a stop sign. This is not gonna affect anyone except for the people on that block or maybe one block over who, we had a very large turnout of people who were in favor of it. And last, I'll say, we don't, you know, we had another traffic control request the exact same night, and we said no. But we're charged with reviewing it. That was the decision of the committee, so I'll ask you to support it.
Additional comments? Alderman Brand?
Yeah, I just want to provide some clarification. Part of the consultant's recommendation under the heading recommendations, and I quote, based on the analysis detailed herein for the Chatham-Oneida Avenue intersection, no changes are recommended to the current 2-way yield control configuration. So it is a recommendation to not do anything. It's straightforward and direct that no changes are recommended to the current 2-way yield control configuration. And then it goes on and references the MUTCD. I will say also, according to the data, there's Oneida going east is a speed issue. I think they were, the 85th percentile was 37 miles per hour, which is significant. So I would say that it's really enforcement on controlling the speed that people are going down Oneida, if it's cut through or whomever those individuals are, but that's significant for a residential street, not a controlling, traffic control device, which is supposed to pretty much determine who has the right-of-way going down a street. I think it's more of that enforcement of the speed, because it doesn't meet any of the criteria that's stated, accidents included, doesn't meet it.
Any additional comments? Seeing none, I'll ask Clerk Spencer to call the vote.
Kennedy, absent. Honquist.
Absent for the moment.
Brennan.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Boyder.
Aye.
Sabatino.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Brand.
No.
Palumski.
Aye.
York, absent. Toledo.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Eleven ayes, 0, wait. Yeah, is he back? Okay.
Go back.
Honquist,
Aye.
okay.
There you go.
11 ayes.
Point of order. Roll call is missed.
Technically, she has not called the vote yet. She was totaling the vote just here. I can ask the city manager, but I think it should be allowed. Okay? If you
Yeah,
don't-
I don't,
He came in before she
No
called
rule
the official number, so I'm going to let him vote aye, as he stated. City Clerk, your count.
11 ayes, 1 nay, 2 absent.
11 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries. Agenda item 6.2 is, 2.0 is approved. We're going to do a shift change?
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Bit of a shift change here, folks. Please give us a minute. Good? Okay. Deputy Clerk Malone sitting in with us now. Let's see, 2.0 approved. That concludes all items pulled from consent agenda. On to agenda item 7.1, a committee report. This is out of DP&Z. I'd ask the deputy clerk to read the recommendation.
Therefore, it is in the recommendation of the Development Planning and Zoning Committee that the City Council authorize the city attorney to prepare the proper documents to the approval of the development agreement with Lennar LMC for the construction of up to 212-unit luxury apartment complex with a brick facade on the Addison Avenue side of the building. Signed, Michael Honquist, Chair, Mark A. Molnar, Vice Chair, and Bob Dunn.
Okay, to put this before council, ask for a motion to approve the report and recommendation as read. Motion by Alderman Honquist, second by Alderman Mulliner. Alderman Honquist, your report.
Thank you, Mayor. This is known to most of us as the Lennar project on Addison. We've discussed it in previous city council meeting regarding some of the adjustments to the, what am I trying to say? To the zoning plague. Sorry, I got distracted. And tonight, we're coming back for approval of the project based on some changes. We do, I think, have the ability to show some of this if need be tonight, but quickly I'll go through what we discussed with Lennar, who, by the way, I think has been a good partner to us on this as we work through this over the last few months. What we landed on last week, after some final discussions, are some facade changes. Originally, the building was going to be what they call cementitious, did I say that correct? Around the entire building. And based on discussions with the committee and help with the mayor, we moved one tower to all brick. When we did that originally, the estimates were somewhere in the range of about $1 million. Through further discussion, we also discussed the second tower, which, if you guys remember, it's all facing Addison Street. So there's two towers, and it's set back, and then a larger tower in the back, that both would be bricked. And then, in addition to that, we had a couple of requests, one to removal from the SSA, which makes sense since there's no, this is actually all residential building, city undergrounding utilities in the rear, which we've done on other projects and similar projects, and then also some public improvements to the alley and to Addison, you know, from a city perspective around the building. So stuff that we've traditionally done and has been pretty straightforward was requested. In final discussions, we basically came to the point of, and I want to make one more point, that as we went to them with some of these discussions, it was a request of the city to make changes to the facade, and then to look at what those costs might be on either tower or both towers. And through those discussions, where we landed, and their response, of course, then was, well, if we're going to make substantial changes to the look and feel of the building, then we might need some help, which was a fair request back, along with the other couple of items I mentioned, in the eyes of the committee. So as we got to the final discussion last week, Lennar actually came forward and said they would pay for one tower. They would also, there's an area in the back that we need to put some utilities. They would not charge us for that, which was originally there. And then just the other asks which were there, and then just to absorb one side, which was now reduced to $500,000. And the way to do that, through working with staff, was to waive the permit fees, which obviously works well for us because that does not mean we're putting cash out. So in the end, what the building looks like is similar to what I think most renderings everyone has seen. Both towers will be bricked. Lennar commented that they felt that it was a better project than when they started, with some of the additions and some of the discussions back and forth. The ask has been very fair and consistent with what we've done in the past. And for both facades, we're talking about a $500,000 waiver of the permitting fees, which is the additional assistance requested. So that, in summary, is what was laid out to us. If anyone needs questions or wants to look at how some of the renderings, we can put those up. Otherwise, I ask for your support for this project. Thank you.
Comments? Alderman Brennan.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended last week's DPZ committee meeting to hear firsthand the discussion. I'm very interested in what's going on downtown. From the get-go, I've been a fan of this project. In particular, I was, very pleased, with how reasonable, Lennar has been with partnering with us and how they have addressed our concerns and our requests. So I will be voting yes this evening as I look forward to the completion of this project, because I think it'll be a huge benefit to our downtown, as well as, the city is going to realize an increment of $750K, an annual tax increment from this project. So I think this is good for Elmhurst. It has my support. Thank you.
Polomsky.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to start by saying I appreciate the work of the committee and the direction in which this project is headed. I do think that new development is good and that allowing for various uses will continue to draw in residents, visitors, and businesses. More height at the core of downtown is appropriate, as are a variety of architectural styles. I think most aldermen agree with this. We need to keep in mind that in this market, it's likely for an apartment building developer to want to complete a project and sell it for profit soon after completion, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when city financial assistance is included, we become the investors, and as such, we have a responsibility to represent our constituents' interests. And that means ensuring that we're facilitating new development in a manner to support the longevity and sustained EAV growth over time. One way in which we do this is by adhering to the design guidelines that we've approved and adopted. Our downtown plan update, which amended the 2009 comprehensive plan in June of 2016, includes specific direction given by residents and other stakeholders to provide guidance on what downtown should look like. The direction is aimed at preserving quality and charm. Some may argue that these guidelines are just that, guidelines, and I agree when the development is funded entirely by a private entity and when the development is outright permitted, meaning it doesn't need any zoning relief. But I also believe that once we're in the territory of answering a question about whether conditional use conforms with our comprehensive plan, or when we consider investing in a project, guidelines are no longer elective. We have the responsibility to ensure that public funds support the vision of our community. And though the proposed changes brought to the DP&Z committee incorporated into this report move much closer to meeting our guidelines by increasing the amount of masonry exterior, and I appreciate Lennar working so closely with staff and the committee and for the continued movement on it. I think that's great. But I wanted to point to a few of the components of the design guidelines that I'm talking about. So the exterior materials is definitely part of it. But when we look at an example, roof lines and parapets, I'll just read just a little bit from here. Roof lines and cornice elevation should be generally consistent with surrounding development. Variation is encouraged to provide visual interest. Long continuous eaves or roof lines should be broken by vertical trim elements, small setbacks, moderations in elevation to avoid monotony and to create visual interest. Roof parapets should be encouraged to create an interesting building profile when combined with neighboring buildings. Looking at building bulk and proportion. Columns and window placement and other architectural features should be used to subdivide facades of larger buildings into several smaller vertical segments to reflect the scale and proportion of adjacent properties. And architectural details on larger buildings should be used to help maintain the scale and proportion of downtown. These details include size of windows, location of doorways, design and placement of columns, moldings, other decorative features, and then architectural style. So this recognizes that it says new buildings need not be historic and modern forms are acceptable. So this is not saying that any one type of style doesn't fit, but it says that all development at the core should have a decorative cornice and cap on the building. Building materials, we've addressed that, and I appreciate that. You know, one other piece is, part of our downtown plan is, you know, I think I'll get to this, about how we communicate that. But I do want to say that I will not support the city's assistance, financial assistance in this project. It's consistent with how I voted in the past. In 2013, we conducted a request for proposal process for what was then known as Hahn Street, and it's now the 255 building. The proposal submitted by the developer that we approved specifically stated, quote, "The city's design guidelines will be incorporated." At that time, though, that spoke to the 2009 downtown plan, which has since been updated. In our first council meeting in March of 2017, we had a TIF request for what was known as the Opus Building and now the Mark at the corner of Addison and First. I did not vote for this because the proposed development did not meet our design guidelines, and I stated that at the time. 2 weeks later, when discussing the new Homestar TIF request, I made a motion to amend the redevelopment agreement to incorporate the following. Quote, "Whereas the project shall be developed and constructed in accordance with the 2016 downtown plan design guidelines, including, but not limited to, the following: architectural style, building materials, doors and entrances, windows, roof lines, and parapets," end quote. That amendment was approved, and the amended ordinance was also approved by a vote to 13 to 1. So I don't know why the design guidelines were not noted in the development proposals throughout as they were in 2013. And I think there are a number of ways in which the city can facilitate how they're incorporated. In the design guidelines document portion of our downtown plan, it does say that the guidelines should be distributed to property owners, prospective designers, and developers. They should be used as a reference by architects and developers, and that they should be used by City Center and other downtown organizations to advise and encourage merchants to redevelop within those guidelines. I also will say, though, I don't want to get too far off the agenda, but I would like to suggest that we first focus on demonstrating that these are important to us. We did just adopt them, and for example, by doing that, making them readily available, I had a difficult time finding them if just doing a Google search. When you look at comprehensive plan on the city website, there's an older version in different divisions that are not labeled. It's just difficult to find. And so, well, I think after discussing, you know, these agenda items, people do find them important. The council finds them important. We just need to make them more prominent, and I'm sure we'll have more discussions about it. But overall, I think the types and the amount of money requested by Lennar is entirely appropriate, not unreasonable. We should be we should be willing to fund streetscape and utility relocation. I think that these are even some components of the assistance with the building, but I think that we need to insist on incorporating these guidelines to a broader extent because we are, once we become an investor in it. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. There are a number of standard elements in the proposed development agreement. However, I think it's worth noting that a building's design has not typically been negotiated in this way. I believe strongly that design matters and that a well-designed building can greatly enhance our downtown, far beyond property tax increment or sales tax generated by new residents. For those reasons, I appreciate the attention to design as well as the developer's flexibility and responsiveness. However, I'm concerned with the approach taken for this project and what it means for projects going forward. I've been told that developers can work within most parameters as long as they understand what they are. They work best when there is certainty. Our downtown plan establishes design guidelines that should provide a level of certainty, and I think it's important that we make those guidelines widely known at the initial stages of development. We seem to have shifted away from utilizing design guidelines, and if there is any question as to whether or not the established guidelines are appropriate, we should revisit them, and in the meantime, we should be using them to guide all of our downtown development. It's not clear to me that Lennar's proposed design changes reflect thoughtful design or simply an eagerness to obtain the city's approval. For that reason, it's difficult to measure the benefit of the city's investment, although the amount is not unreasonable. I also don't want to establish a practice of bringing forth a project that doesn't meet the city's design guidelines and expecting the city to offset the cost of improvements. For those reasons, I will not vote in favor of this report.
Alderman Dunn.
I appreciate the comments by Alderman Polonsky and Deuter. Those are certainly some concerns that I've had. As most of you will remember, I voted against the zoning variances and conditional use of this for this project months ago, as well as with the Opus project for just those reasons. I think that we got to a point with Lennar where they were working collaboratively, and we got to a point where we have a project, a look that it will work. I think there's a significant showing to meet a lot of our design guidelines. I mean, you talk about the brick and masonry. That's a large footprint on the side of the building. I understand the accents, the cornices on the roof line are also in our plan. But I think the timing on this project was a little bit unfortunate. There were some lessons learned from the MARC project, the Opus project. I think we were pretty far along on this project, the Lennar project, but before we really came to grips with some of the aldermen and a lot of residents. I've heard from a lot of residents they were not happy with the way the Opus MARC project ended up. So I think our intent was to not make the same mistake, but the project was fairly far along at that point. But I appreciate Lennar's efforts. I think they came forth with initially with a good design. There was good intent. It's a U-shaped building, so it's off of Addison. It's not as obtrusive, and there were setbacks on the top floor. There's a lot of glazing, a lot more than some of the other projects, a lot of windows. So there's a lot of good elements of this project. And when we pointed out that some of the design elements that we'd like to see we're still missing, even though there are some good features to the projects. They work very diligently over the last month or two to really redesign the project to make that happen. There had to be new reinforcement. They're not just sticking very thin fake bricks up there. These are substantive bricks that are going to have real masonry applied to them, so I think we're going to be much happier. Lennar also feels it's an improvement to the project. The $500,000, first, the estimate for both towers to put brick facade on the end caps, which is the side of the building that's facing Addison, plus a wraparound on both sides, was up around $1.5 million. They got that down to about $1 million for both towers, and they indicated they would pay for the south tower, which I thought was a nice offer in good faith, and they asked for help on the north tower. Coincidentally, $500,000, that is about the cost of the permit fees and the way those are derived. It's 1% of the hard cost of the project, which is estimated to be $51 million right now. So about $500,000 would be about that. The overall project is estimated to be $70 million, and as Alderman Brennan said, we expect a increase in tax revenue every year of $700,000. So it is a very economically beneficial project. So I want to thank Lennar and city staff for working on this issue to come up with a solution that I think will work. And I felt they had a can-do attitude. Every meeting we had substantive progress. So I appreciated that. I appreciate their effort. The cost of $500,000, I think it was echoed that, you know, overall $70 million project, that's fairly small. That doesn't include the burying of the utilities, which we have been doing as common practice with a lot of these large projects, as well as the landscaping. We've been helping out there also. Lennar was not able to benefit from the facade program as Opus did. That went away. So Opus was able to gain a benefit of our old facade program, even though they tore a building down and just built a new one. So in our new policy, we've done away with that. So I think what we have is a good project. It's an improvement that I can live with, and I think it's the cost is fair and reasonable, and I will support this tonight. Thanks.
Toledo, you had your hand up.
I did. Thank you. I have a lot of familiarity with this project. As you all know, I was serving on the committee when this first came in front of us, saw it through the zoning approvals, and then moved on after in April to a different committee. But the point is that this is a good project for the city. This, all the way along, Lennar has been a good partner. The committee has done a lot of work to continue to improve the project, to get it to where it is a good fit for our city and our community, which is where we're at. We're going to be bringing in new residents. We are increasing our EAV, which helps us keep property taxes lower for all the rest of us in town because we're bringing in incremental property value. And it's going to pay back the investment that's being requested here in less than a year once it comes online, or two at that. Someone brought up the question of bulk, and that we have to be concerned with that as it relates to the downtown planning guidelines. And I will point out that this is a unique design in two ways that actually minimize the effective bulk of this building. One, as Alderman Dunn pointed out, the U-shape. To most passersby on Addison, it will look like two separate buildings from the street because of the U-shape from the second floor up, which I think is unique and helpful from that respect, because someone could have put a 6-story building all the way up to the sidewalk, all the way from lot line to lot line, which would have appeared much bulkier than this building appears. And then my last comment that I would like everyone to keep in mind is this is likely to be the last, or will be the last substantive, sizable project in our downtown that will go through a process that's not managed by our new planned unit development process. The planned unit development process, as you all know, which we approved back in March in the springtime sometime, is very well laid out. I think it improves the word Alderman Reuter used, reliability. I can't remember exactly what word you used for the developers, for our residents, and for those of us on the committee and the council that eventually will make decisions on those upcoming projects. So I support this project, and I thank the committee for their work, and I look forward to moving this into the next stage. Thank you.
Any other comments? Alderman Bram, then I'll go to Alderman Levin.
Thank you. Excuse me. I also want to thank the committee. I know any type of large development planning and zoning project that comes through takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of discussions. And I want to actually throw out a kudos to Lennar as well. I know they worked with the neighboring development to the north of them. They had discussions with them, and then obviously discussions with us as well, and when it comes to the redevelopment agreement. As I walked through what was being requested and then what the committee was recommending, I was happy to do check marks on everything, but it seemed to be the sticking point, and with some of my colleagues as well, is the waiving of the permit fees for $500,000. It's a sticky situation because I personally think that, as already discussed by Alderman Polonsky and others, the design guidelines should be followed. And how do we get developers to go there? But the sticky situation here is, well, at what point do we say it's okay to still make an offer to fund part or all of what we deem to be a necessity in those design guidelines? Some may say, and some have said tonight, 50% of the total cost to have a brick facade is okay or acceptable. I'm a little bit undecisive on that. It seems 50% or $500,000 for a total of $1 million for this, what I would deem to be at least improved facade is a little bit much. And the reason being is, and Alderman Toledo just made a point that maybe this doesn't apply and maybe it's not a precedent, but what if a developer wants to do that and comes with the same type of facade but says, hey, I will do what you want if you give me X dollars. I'm not making any assumptions that Lennar or any development has done that. I'm just making a statement that because of the fact on when this is being done, someone can come in with the bare bones, and this, if we move forward with this, this is improving their project. It's costing more, therefore those dollars are gonna be propagated to those who actually rent here, these luxury apartments. So the cost, from the city perspective, the benefit we're getting is aesthetics and aesthetics only. From the development perspective, at least in my mind, it's aesthetics as well as a better value, therefore possibly, potentially better rent. So for those reasons, and those reasons only being the dollar amount for the facade, I can't support this recommendation.
Levin?
Thank you, Mayor. I think that we've had some struggles with this project. I think Lennar is a recognized quality developer. My firm has had some dealings with them in LaGrange, and they do what they're supposed to do, I believe. I think it's maybe for us, for the next time, whether it's through the PUD process or however the process goes, for us to put to the forefront what our design guidelines are, and to make sure that the developers understand that they're important to us, so that when we get right at the starting line, that everyone knows what we're trying to achieve. Could the building have been a little better looking? Maybe so. I mean, when you look at the downtown plan and you look at all the features of all the buildings we have in our town, you see the kinds of things that Alderman Palumski highlighted that add to the attractiveness of the building stock in our downtown area. It's important not just for what we build today, but these buildings are going to be around for a long time. And I guess I'll pat the back of Elmhurst 255 Hahn Street. We took them to task. They stepped up to the plate. And I think that's a building that meets all of the guidelines that we laid out, even though it was ahead of the curve. And that's a building that I think in 50 years you'll look at it and say it's a good-looking building, and it's stood the test of time. Lennar has done what we asked. I think the committee, I hate to keep thanking the committee, they might get big-headed over this, but they put in the work, and I know city staff did as well, to bring this development from where it was going to where it is. It's a good project now. For all the reasons that Alderman Toludo spoke of, it's time to approve it. I don't have any problem with the amount of the contribution through the fee waiver. I think it's well worth it for what we're getting here. So I'm going to support this project, and I'm hopeful that when we go to the next one, that we look at design guidelines up front so that we aren't struggling at the end of the project. But it's time to go with this one.
Additional comments? Alderman Mulliner.
I just want to make a couple of real quick comments. Of course, you know that I'm well in support of this project. A couple of things I just want to make very clear. We're waiving, what we're asking to do is to waive the permit fees. That does not mean that the impact fees for the school district or the park district are going to be waived. Those fees will still be paid. So the park district and school district will not be impacted at all by this. In fact, it will be to long-term benefit to them because they'll be receiving some additional dollars. The other thing that I want to make sure is very clear is that everybody understands that this is an RD, a redevelopment agreement. It is not a TIF ask. We're not using TIF dollars for this. This is something where we're rebating dollars back basically by saying we're not going to ask for the permit fees. We're going to use some additional dollars to do the facade work and the alley work, but I want to make it very clear that these are not TIF dollars that we're dealing with here, so this is not a TIF agreement, and it's also something where the impact fees for both the school district and park district will move forward as appropriate and as we've done in the past.
Alderman Honquist.
One last comment. I thank everyone for their support. I just want to be clear that the developer did adhere to our guidelines. If we don't like our guidelines, we need to change our guidelines, which we can have in a follow-on discussion. But if you go through the report, they did meet our guidelines. So granted, we made some variances. I agree with that. But as far as the look and design, which is what I'm hearing tonight. So if anyone drives through Oak Park, you will see a large cementitious building that's larger than what we're talking about in the middle of a community that takes great pride in its architectural design. So we have differences on what we think is good or bad, and I can respect those, but I just want to be clear that the developer did come through and work with us on both our guidelines and what we wanted to see downtown. I think it's a great project. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll ask Clerk Malone to call the vote.
Kennedy, absent. Onquest,
Aye.
Brennan,
Aye.
Molnar,
Aye.
Schroeder,
No?
Sabentino,
Aye.
Leader,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Graham,
No.
Palumski,
No.
York, absent. Toledo,
Aye.
Park,
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes, 3 nays, and 2 absent.
9 ayes, 3 nays, motion carries. Agenda item 7.1 is approved. On to reports and recommendations. Mayor Morley, that's me. Couple of things. We've got Public Safety Night tomorrow at Barron's Park from 6 to 8. Hold up here, and they're not here now. Where we're going to display safety vehicles and have demonstrations, including the police cars, fire trucks, the Elmhurst Mobile Incident Command Vehicle, and an NIPAS SWAT vehicle, to name a few, along with some giveaways and refreshments. So I encourage everyone to go. Barron's Park tomorrow, 6 to 8. Just about a week and a half ago, on the 26th, we had our 7th annual bike race. Went off without a hitch. Weather cooperated the whole time, even had a little bit of cloud and a little bit of breeze to cool it off a little bit. I know it might be hard to believe, and Kevin York's not here. I want to thank him, but this is actually our 7th annual. 7th annual, hard to believe, we've already had 7. Superior Ambulance, Elmhurst Cycling Classic. Went off without a hitch, it was fantastic. Happy to say that the crashes were down this year. I don't know why, but I think it's a good thing. Certainly, it's a nod to Public Works, because they know everything, but go over it with a pair of tweezers before those bikers get on there. So I want to thank them. I want to thank Kevin York, Rob Hocking, Ed Savarini, Jim Ward, Yosteen, Tim Radcliffe, and all the volunteers. I certainly want to thank all of the sponsors, the college, the Park District, and Police and Fire. Fantastic event, really showcases Elmhurst, and looking forward to next year. Oh, and a fascinating thing. I don't know if you can watch this on the line or not, but it's unbelievable. The women's pro race was won by a 16-year-old young lady. It was just fascinating to watch. I had an opportunity to meet her, just poised, but a 16-year-old girl. It was just amazing. It was fantastic. And then the men's pro race, basically the peloton didn't break up. The entire race ran through the finish line. It was just fantastic racing, and it was amazing. I don't know how those guys do it. Clearly, I don't know how they do it. Neighborhood roll call coming up this week. Award-winning neighborhood roll call. Tuesday, North End in Indiana. What is that about, Jim? 4:30? What time is?
6:30.
6:30, I should know that. Neighborhood roll call Tuesday, North End in Indiana. On Thursday, Wilson and Swain, 6 o'clock. Come out. 6:30? Yeah, 6:30. See? It's a good thing other people in charge of that. 6:30. So anyway, it's an opportunity for the neighbors to meet our police department. I encourage everyone to go out. It's a good time. And it's very informational, and you actually have an opportunity to ask questions as well. Also a reminder, as we get into August and people start watering their lawns, among other things, I would encourage all residents, I think we're well below 50%, I would encourage all residents to sign up for our Water Smart program. Not only is it valuable, it will tell you if you leave your sprinkler on, but also if you go on vacation, you will get a notification if there's water being used. So I can't say enough about it, and that's just scratching the surface on what that can do for you. Our award-winning trolley runs through September 4th, noon to midnight, Fridays and Saturdays until September 4th. We continue to excel with that trolley, and actually our numbers, ridership is even up from last year. So that continues to be a success. And then finally, I want to thank council as it relates to the most recent discussion they just had as it relates to building. I think it's probably one of the toughest things we tackle is design preference, stuff like that. I used to sit on DP&Z. Alderman Rose, who was a bit of a mentor of mine, used to say, of course, I want to have guidelines as long as I agree with them. And that was her way of saying that everybody, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and it's not an easy thing. I think council had a very good discussion. I'm not going to thank the committee, they've been thanked enough. But I want to point out what Alderman Toledo said, which is there's actually a new process in place that I think might smooth out some of these challenges that were pointed out. But overall, I think it's a good project. So I want to thank council for their hard work on that, and the committee. City manager.
Thank you. Tonight, I'll focus a little bit more on construction. As everybody knows, this is roadway construction season, and it seems to never end, at least in Elmhurst. We're surrounded by it, and included in that, NICOR is doing quite a bit of work throughout town as well, with a big main and then individual service lines. Some good news, though, Emroy is done, and that bridge opened a few weeks ago, so traffic can get through there again. North Avenue continues to move on. We're being told that they'll have pavement down by the end of August and striping done by the mid-September. West Avenue is done and striped, and just in time for Spring Road to start up, if you've seen that. So we appreciate everyone's patience as we go through this. If anybody hears of concerns as the road construction moves forward, please let us know. We have some very good people in our engineering department and also on the job to help address those issues.
Very good. Any other reports? Seeing none, we'll go on to ordinances. Number 9, 9.1. This is an ordinance as a result of a report we had in the consent agenda 6.21, where council approved to waive the rules due to the timing required to get this J.C.'s Carnival moving. I would ask Clerk Malone to read the ordinance.
An ordinance approving and authorizing the execution of a non-exclusive license agreement by and between Elmhurst J.C.'s, Inc. and the City of Elmhurst, DuPage, and Cook Counties, Illinois.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the ordinance as read. Motion by Alderman Palomsky, second by Alderman Levin. Discussion. Seeing none, I'll ask for a call to the vote.
Kennedy, absent. Conquest.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Mulner.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
Sabatino.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Palomsky.
Aye.
York, absent. Toledo.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, and 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Agenda item 9.1 is approved. On to other business. Any other business? Entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Alderman Mulliner, second by Alderman Honquist. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.